Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the General Purposes Committee. I'm Councillor James Flanagan, Chair of this committee. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please meet at the Tower House car park if such an event arises. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being minuted, filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, please make a member of staff aware and they will direct you where to sit. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public should leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. That's the safety message. Now, before we commence with tonight's agenda, I'd just like to say a few words. Members may have heard the very sad news that Steve Bailey, the chair of Chesfield Parish Council, died earlier this week. Steve had been a parish councillor for 16 years and served as chair of the parish council for 15 of those. In recent years, he had also become chair of the local association for Calc, which would have been looking at a topic such as the one we're discussing tonight, very close to his heart and interests, amongst many other roles that he held. And I'm sure that members would want to join me in conveying our thoughts and condolences to Steve's wife, his family and friends at this very difficult time, and also to remember Steve in his role in the local community and the contribution that he gave to the local community in all those years. On that point, I'd just like to pause for a short moment just to remember Steve as chair of the parish council. Thank you very much. We'll now begin tonight's agenda, so we'll begin with item 1, apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Bland.
Thank you. Item 2, any substitute members, please?
No substitute members.
Thank you, Pippa. Item 3, declarations of interest by members or officers. Do we have any declarations, please? Yes, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, just that I'm a member of the CGR working group, which is reporting into this committee today.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other declarations? Councillor Old?
Similar to my fellow councillor, I'm also a member of the review group. Thank you.
Can I just ask, are there any other members who are on the working group here tonight? Any other declarations, please? Okay, thank you. So item 4, public participation. We have 2 public speakers for item 6 this evening, who we will hear just before that item when we come to it. Item 5, minutes of the last meeting. So we've been asked to agree the minutes of the last meeting of the General Purposes Committee, which, would you believe, was 18 or so months ago, on the 8th of October 2024. I'm at the advantage I gave my apologies for that meeting, so it's down to members to recall what was discussed and to vote by general assent on whether you're happy with the record with the minutes in the pack tonight. Could I see a vote? General assent, please. I think that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so item 6 is the Community Governance Review Terms of Reference, which is on pages 10 to 28 of tonight's agenda. As in the usual format, we'll hear the public speakers first, then we'll consider the report of the Joint Chief Executive. We're being joined tonight by Matthew Archer, Head of Corporate Governance, and Richard Beasley, consultant with the Association of Electoral Administrators, who's supporting the council through this process. Good evening to you both. After the report, we'll then open it up in the usual way to debate. So could I begin first by calling Richard Norman? Good evening, Richard. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillors and Chair. As someone who's been actively involved in trying to help promote local democracy over the years, I particularly want to welcome the fact that this community governance review is happening. I want to welcome the process that's proposed for it, and I want to very much welcome the paper that's been circulated, which I think is a very good paper, and I know I'm not alone in saying that. More specifically, I want to welcome the fact that this community governance review is very clearly and firmly located in the context of local government reorganisation. That's well emphasised in the paper, and that's very important. I'm already seeing posts on Facebook saying, why are we having all of this again? And of course, the very clear answer is because we're in a very different situation and there are very different questions that need to be addressed by this review. And I think it's really important that that's emphasised, and I'm glad it is in the paper. I also wanted to welcome the fact that the process that's envisaged is in terms of 2 phases of consultation. And that's really important because there isn't one simple question that's needed, that will have to be put to people in this process. And teasing out the complexities through those 2 phases will again be very important. But the one concern I want to raise is the need for clarity about the relationship between those 2 phases. It's really important to get that clear because we know from experience that if they're not clearly distinguished, then when it comes to the second round of consultation, people might say, well, I've already answered that, so I don't need to respond again. And of course, it's rightly emphasised that it's the second phase that's important in this one. So we do need clarity about what's being asked in the 2, and that's what I'm a little bit concerned about. Clearly, we can't say now what will be asked in the second phase because that will depend on the recommendations coming out of the first phase. So what's being asked in the first phase, and that's what's not entirely clear, I think. In the paper, this is on the 7th page of the paper, it's in the section headed Overall CGR Process. It says the first round of consultation will be broad in nature, inviting local people, elected representatives and organisations to respond with information about governance arrangements in their communities. Now, information is a rather odd word there, I think. We're not asking for information, we're asking for views. Views about what? What I'd like to suggest is that it could be formulated in terms of asking for views about local government reorganisation and its impact, asking people, how do you think that local government reorganisation will affect democratic arrangements in your locality? How will it affect what democratic voice you have? What are your concerns about its impact? And how do you think that those concerns should be addressed? Those, it's not for me to obviously formulate questions exactly, but those, it seems to me, are the sorts of questions that could be usefully put in the first phase. They would generate the recommendations that you will then need, and they would re-emphasise the fact that it's happening within the context of local reorganisation. So that's the one suggestion I would like to make to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make it, and I look forward to seeing how this process develops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I call Bob Pullen? Evening. The floor is yours, Bob.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'd just like to raise a few points about the material the council's published last week, announcing the forthcoming Community Governance Review, or CGR for short, and the report you are considering at General Purposes Committee this evening. Firstly, I'd like to welcome the quote on page 12 of the report, which is as follows. It is important to note any future changes to arrangements, including the creation of new parish councils, will not, on its own, be a substitute for the new unitary authority incorporating appropriate community engagement into its own structures, which will still be expected by government. This of course refers to the neighbourhood area forums, which the new unitary councils will set up once they themselves are established. Neighbourhood area forums cannot be considered as an alternative to the establishment of a new parish or town councils, as the statement in the report makes clear. In any case, are not covered in the CGR legislative or guidance framework, and I hope the consultation material will only make reference to them as such. Secondly, I very much welcome the unequivocal statement in section 2 on page 14 of the report, and I quote, "It is important to note it is Canterbury City Council which decides community governance arrangements." I see statements, particularly on social media, that it's up to local people to decide whether or not new parish or town councils should be created for their area. This is quite simply wrong. Residents and other stakeholders quite rightly get to put their views, and then those views are taken into account. But ultimately, it's the City Council who take the decision, as they did at the end of the last CGR for Whitstable 2 years ago. Equally welcome is the statement in the frequently asked questions published last week that, again, I quote, "The consultation is not a referendum," in response to the question about how the council will handle the risk that people in support or against town councils may be overrepresented in the feedback. This is also pertinent to the resolution the council made at its meeting on the 23rd of February to commit funds to undertake this CGR to consider the creation of town or parish councils alongside other options. The decision on whether or not to create new town or parish councils isn't a binary choice. Finally, this leads on to what precise information residents will be given regarding community government structures in the consultation material. And I would hope that the consultation material will set out at least the summary information that's given in your report on pages 14 and 15 on the forms of community governance, including town and parish councils, area committees, area forums, residents' associations, etc., etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our public speakers. We'll now move across to the introduction of the report this evening. Before I do, I should also mention that we're joined this evening by Councillor Chris Cornell, who's Cabinet Member, but also Chair of the Working Group. So Matthew, over to you to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to tell you that I won't actually be introducing the report today. I'm here to introduce Richard as our consultant. The two of us will be working hand in hand on the review. I will be leading it from the Council's perspective, working closely with Richard and also a project team who will be supporting this from the policy and communications side as well. So I think for now I will hand over to Richard and let him introduce, and then when we're taking questions, I'll let Richard lead on any technical points, and if there are any that he's not comfortable answering because they might reflect a Canterbury position, he will hand over to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Yes, my role within the review is to provide advice and support to the council. Obviously, it's the council, as we've heard, that will make the final decisions. I'm here to provide the background support to enable you to make decisions as we go through. This report this evening asks members to consider and approve the terms of reference for the Community Governance Review, or CGR, which will signify the formal launch of the review and the initiation of the first round of public consultation. The CGR is the mechanism through which this council can review local community governance arrangements within the area, and that includes parish and town councils. The CGR has two main themes. First, the unparished areas of Canterbury, Herne Bay and Whitstable, to consider whether parish or town councils should be created to serve those communities. And secondly, the existing parishes to consider if any changes are required to better reflect the needs of the local communities. As you've heard, and as you'll be well aware, the council undertook a CGR in Whitstable following a petition fairly recently, and some of you may be asking why we're revisiting that question again now. Since that CGR, central government has started the process of local government reorganisation, and under that reorganisation, Canterbury City Council and Kent County Council will be abolished and replaced by a single unitary authority. At the moment, we don't know the exact size and scope of the new arrangements, but we do know that the new authority will cover a larger area than the Canterbury City Council area as present, and that the total number of councillors serving residents in this area will be less than the number of city and county councillors combined. There could therefore be a possible reduction in local representation, leading to a gap that a parish or town council may be able to fill, representing local people within their specific communities. But it's important to note at this stage, no decisions have been made, and the outcomes of this CGR will rely on hearing from local people. The terms of reference you have before you are deliberately broad to maximise the flexibility for this council to deliver the review. Once approved, the first stage consultation will begin, and we invite local residents, existing parish councils and local community representatives to respond and tell us about their communities and any changes they think would be beneficial, or indeed if they feel no changes are needed. This first round of consultation is broad and non-specific, and all views are welcome to help us to develop those proposals. It's effectively a blank sheet of paper, and we're asking people what they think. Using that information, we will, with the Councillor Working Group, develop the draft recommendations which will be discussed by this committee and full council before a further round of consultation. That will include the specific proposals that people will be able to respond to. It's important to note that any changes proposed must be included in those draft recommendations, and we can't simply add them in the closing stages of the review. And it's only after that second round of consultation that final recommendations will be developed for future agreement by members. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Matthew. So we now move to the debate part of the meeting. But before we do, in the normal way, we move the recommended option to begin the debate. So the recommendation, which I will move, is option 1, that the terms of reference for the community governance review be approved, effectively launching the first round of public consultation. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brady, thank you very much.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. We now open it up to debate. Would members like to? Yes, Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we welcome this paper and the start of the discussion about the review of how this area is governed. But I'm more concerned that it seems more like a review on how we come about, how we change parish councils and the effects on parish councils, rather than necessarily, and obviously the interest coming from Herne Bay in an area that is not parished. I'll give you, for example, on page 14, there's not a single mention of town councils, but it talks about forms of governance. It talks about parish councils, it does say parish councils stroke town councils, but then it goes on to talk about parish meetings, area committees, neighbourhood management programmes, tenant management associations, area forums, etc., etc., and nothing about how town councils will be addressed or what they're and how they relate to parish councils or whatever form comes followed on from parish councils. Again, in the appendix 3, I think it's on page 25. Pardon me, Chair, while I just scroll up. Again, it says, it talks about the electoral, there's the scope of the review, for instance. It talks about the electoral arrangements for parish councils. Again, nothing about town councils. The whole paper, it seems, it's all, there's nothing about that relationship, as I talked about earlier. And I'm also, there's no mention really about the relationship between the parish councils, town councils, and whatever comes about in terms of the unitary authority. How do they mesh? How do they talk to each other, as it were? And again, a lot of the paper is discussion about parish councils and how they might work and talk and what their boundaries might be, but nothing again about town councils or indeed the unitary authority.
Thank you, Councillor. Richard, would you like to come back on those points, please?
Yeah, thank you for those points. In terms of, first of all, throughout the paper, where we use the word parish, we include town councils. So a town council is a form of parish council. So in the paper where we use the word parish, it means parish/town. But rather than writing /town all the way through, it's taken as read. But I accept that if you're not expecting that, you won't have spotted it. But throughout the paper, town councils are implied with wherever it says parish. On page 14 and 15, the list of forms of governance, this is something that we're effectively required to bring to your attention, that parish council is not the only form of governance that there is. However, within the 2010 government guidance, which was published by the then DCLG, although they list all these forms of governance, they do say that parish and town councils are effectively the best form of governance because they're the only one that has democratically elected representatives. So the expectation through their guidance would be that if you're changing governance, you'd be looking to see whether a parish or town council is the most appropriate option. Parish meetings won't apply in this case because we're looking at larger community areas anyway. They're effectively very small parish councils for specific small areas. And your third point that you raised about the relationship with the future unitary authority, any structure of local government, whether it's a city council, district council, county council, or unitary, is required to consider the role of parish councils. They will have a statutory voice in certain matters such as planning and other community governance and constitutive roles, and that will continue with the unitary when it comes into force, just as it is with the current city and county councils.
Thank you for that, Richard. I'm kind of satisfied with the explanation. Only again, the nation, the way, and obviously the paper and the discussions in the future will be about how parish councils are structured, and there are big questions about that, about their democracy, about how open they are, and so on. Some are operate better than others, but town councils are, at the moment, anyway, are formed differently. Yeah, in terms of wards, in terms of the number of representations in wards, etc. And I think that needs to be reflected that in the paper. Is that going to change? How, if it does change, how would it change? It may be an opportunity to revisit that, how town councils are structured, and perhaps that should be reflected here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellish. Matthew, I think you wanted to come back on a couple of points.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to supplement what Richard was saying, I think when we do go out to consultation on stage one, we will be clear that we're asking for views and comments on the existing parishes, and separately views and comments on what are currently the unparished urban areas. And we will invite that to be either a general comment, or if they wish to comment specifically on one of the individual areas, Herne Bay, Canterbury, Whitstable, then they will have the option to do so. So I think when people actually come to offer their feedback, we will have that clear delineation, and people will understand that we're talking about an area that currently has nothing.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Ian Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think it's very important that we try to enlighten people as to what we're talking about, because as been mentioned, town councils and parish councils are virtually indistinguishable under the current legislation. Most people in Herne Bay certainly hark back to the urban district councils, which had considerable powers, which this proposed town council will not have. So it's very important that they understand what they're actually getting for their money, because it is going to cost them money. Secondly, it was mentioned a few minutes ago, the democratic element of town and parish councils. From my time in this council, I'm very much aware that a lot of parish councils are about as democratic as Adolf Hitler. That sounds a bit extreme, but basically a lot of people, when we took witnesses back in, I don't know, whenever it was, not the last one, but the time before, we had a witness session, and some of the parish councils who were called and attended had never been elected. They'd been on the council for X number of years. They were co-opted on, and it can be not democratic, to say the least. So it's important that people understand, I believe, what they're actually getting for their money. I understand that there's no intention to change the legislation regarding co-opting, etc. So I am concerned about the democratic angle that is being pushed, but actually isn't necessarily so.
Thank you, Councillor. Richard or Matthew? Yep, Richard.
Yes, thank you. You're quite right. That as far as I'm aware, the legislation is not changing about co-option and uncontested elections. There is a role, of course, for all local representatives at all levels of local government to support and encourage people to stand for local election. And there may be people in the community who don't know that they could stand as parish council and might be all too willing to do so. However, you're right, there are a number of parish councils that have uncontested elections year after year after year. my experience of I've done community governance reviews all over England. My experience is that town councils tend not to have that problem because they're bigger communities, but still with a relatively small number of people representing them. You tend to have more people contesting those elections all the time, so they don't have the same democratic or potential democratic deficit. And your first point, you mentioned about making sure people understand what a parish and town council can deliver. And that will certainly be something we make sure we include in the second stage of conversation. If we get to the stage where we are proposing to have a town or parish council in the currently unparished areas, we'll make sure that we're clear on what can be delivered and what could be delivered, because there are statutory things that the parish council or town council can deliver and things that they could choose to do, which we have no say over whether they will or not, but we'll make sure that's clear for people when they respond at that stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. It's really more of a point of clarification, really, around parishes. Am I right in saying that the scope of this CGR really is one of geographical nature in terms of parishes and the extent of their reach? It won't consider what they can do and what they would, how they would be formed, how elections would be run. It's actually quite a narrow element. It's whether we have parish councils and where the boundaries are. So, for example, we might decide to shrink a parish or grow a parish, and that's within the scope, but not what a parish can do and how it would be formed in the first place.
Yeah, you're quite right. Excuse me. You're quite right. This CGR is looking at whether there should be parish and town councils in the unparished areas and whether there should be changes to boundaries effectively to the existing parishes. If there are changes to boundaries, then we'd also be looking at whether they need to have more or fewer parish councillors to serve them, because they'll have a larger or smaller electorate. In terms of how the elections are run, that's written into legislation. We have no say. Once the parish is in, once the parish council exists, the elections start, and then they're every 4 years, or adjusted to tie in with the new unitary authority elections, and then every 4 years thereafter. And the remit of what a parish council could do, there are things that, if they exist, a parish council has to provide, and then everything else is optional, or in liaison with the higher or tier authority, which in this case would be the unitary authority. And now I'm sure that that relationship will develop and change over time with both the existing parishes and if there are any new town councils created, to work out what services the parish can deliver compared to what the unitary authority can deliver. And that will be an ongoing discussion over a period of time. But this CGR is not looking at what they will do. It's saying, should we have them so they have the ability to do those things in time to come?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Old.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, Chair, through you, I'd like to ask two questions, one for Matthew and one for Richard, please. The first question for Matthew is, there's a reserve set aside of £290,000 has been set aside to fund the review. And I wonder if you could just enlighten us on how you think that might be spent in particular in terms of the consultation. Do we intend to leaflet the entire population? How are we going to get people involved? Be interested in that. The second question, on a slightly different point, as a point of information, please, is could you give me some idea of what proportion of the population of England is covered by parishes or town councils? Is it the default position that people have town and parish councils, or is it an unusual position that the population should be covered by town and parish councils? Because if the latter, then why do we feel that it's essential to have this extra layer of governance within our district when it may not be the norm elsewhere? Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew?
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I mean, first of all, just to say that it's a reserve, so we'll be drawing down on it as much as we need to. We're not looking to spend the entire amount just because it's there. We will use it wisely. What we wanted to make sure was that as it's district-wide and in the context of LGR and everything else that's going on at the moment, where officers are obviously under considerable pressure, we want to make sure that we've got sufficient to be able to deliver the review properly. in terms of how it will present itself in relation to the consultation, we're expecting that the first stage will be relatively light touch and that we will spend more of the money on stage 2. The advantage, I think, of doing it this way is that this time we don't have a proposition that we're putting forward to the community within stage 1. It's very much, as Richard said, a blank page. Stage 2, there'll be proposals on the table, which I think is the point when the public are more likely to engage because they will understand then what it is that we are proposing to do, and hopefully we'll have a view on it. So I don't want to sort of prejudge whether we will leaflet or whether we won't, but I think the likelihood is that where an area is going to be affected, and our stage 2 proposal is clear about that, then we would definitely look to leaflet, certainly in localised areas that would be directly affected by it. So it may not be the entire district that we would leaflet, it might be targeted. And again, we would need to think about what it says depending on what the proposals are. But they might even be tailored towards, whatever the individual proposal is in a given area. I don't want to sort of prejudge any more than that, because obviously it might, hinder or fetter the review, and we don't want to do that. But that's just to give you an indication. And then just in terms of how else the money will be used, obviously, having the additional support to support this review and do the data analysis that is required in order to inform the working group decisions doesn't come for free. And in addition to that, we will have some additional internal support as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can't tell you exactly what proportion of England are served by a parish or town council, but effectively outside of London, which only recently was allowed to have parish councils, it is the norm to have a parish or town council. So in the last few years, a large number of unparished areas have started to create parish and town councils. So Royal Tunbridge Wells now has a town council, whereas a few years ago it didn't. Tunbridge has recently voted to have a town council, and that has recently gone through. Redhill and Reigate, a little bit further afield, has just agreed to have town councils, and the northern part of their borough is going to be covered by a parish. And there's a whole load of other reviews ongoing at the moment I'm aware of where they're looking at this, where there's an unparished area, partly because of LGR, although some of these predate that decision. But the majority, it is the norm or usual for most communities to be served by a parish or town council.
My information must be out of date then.
You want to come back? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Because I'd read somewhere, and I can't give you a reference, that only 40% of the population of England was covered by a parish or a town council. And so that was a minority position. Maybe sometime I may be out of date, and you're closer to this, you'll be much more up to date. So I still want to get to an understanding of, will we be saying why we think it's appropriate for our district to move to parish and town councils, where it may not be the norm across the country. That's just the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, once we start taking off London, then you'll be, that 40% would start increasing to close to 50% anyway. But as I say, I don't have the exact numbers. But in terms of why we think, or why council thinks it may be the right thing, we'll know when we start the stage 2 consultation, if that's the proposal that we are going to create town councils. At the moment, there is no proposal to do that. We're looking at whether we should make that decision. If the proposal at stage 2 is we should create a parish or town council in one or more of these unparished areas, that will be the stage we say, and why do we want to do it? And that will be communicated to the public. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Jeanette Stockley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Please, can I have just some clarity? Did I hear you say that stage 1 won't be discussing what the parish council or town council will do? It won't be decided or won't be talked about until stage 2? Because what I'm thinking is, for areas such as Herne Bay, where I am from, who have not had town or parish council will have no idea what a town or parish council may or may not be able to do. They won't know what their money is going to be spent on. If they did know, they may think, great, that's what we want. If they did know, they may think, that's not what I want to spend my money on. That doesn't give me what I thought a town council would give me. So could you tell me that, please?
Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's always a difficult question, this, because on the one hand, you want to be able to articulate what a town council might be able to do. So we will, in our presentations, be outlining the kind of things that town councils do elsewhere. As you say, otherwise people are trying to form a view in a bit of a vacuum, aren't they? So they need to understand what would I get for my money. That's really what people want to know, isn't it? Is how does this affect me directly, and what might the town council do? On the flip side, they are democratic organisations, and no two town councils are the same, and it's not necessarily for us to explain or determine how they might choose to spend the money that they receive through precept. So whilst there might be a pattern of services that are provided, there is a degree of local discretion on how the money is used. And because of that, you don't want to give the impression that if you support a town council, you will get X, Y, and Z in return, because that will be a matter for the town council. And also what it negotiates with the new unitary in terms of the services that it might provide, either in partnership with or on behalf of the unitary council, plus the services that it chooses to supplement using its own money. So a fairly long-winded way of saying, we will explain, but we can't do that definitively.
Councillor Ian Stockley?
Thank you, Chair. Basically, do we know roughly what a parish or town, obviously it depends on the size and what services, but the costs involved? You know, what can, for instance, Herne Bay residents expect to have to pay at the initialisation? I'm thinking a possible comparison to Hersden, which was set up recently. Also, the other, I've lost it, train of thought's gone. Yeah, so basically the costs. Precepts, obviously, again, we can't prejudge what will be considered a reasonable precept for any town council. The other issue that we found in Whitstable, when we looked closely at that on the last working group, was there was quite a divergence of opinion between relatively affluent areas and those areas that are not so affluent, or indeed quite poor. Canterbury is similar, Whitstable has its own, and certainly Herne Bay is some of the most deprived areas we've got. So, you know, how do we address the issue of information so people know what they're going to get for their money and how much it's going to cost? Because obviously, to a large degree, this is an open checkbook at this point. You know, if you set up a town council, it could be relatively inexpensive or it could be very expensive, depending on what they choose to do in the fullness of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Another difficult question, and I can remember from the Whitstable review that inevitably it's one of the first questions that people ask is, well, how much is this going to cost me? And we attempted to put a figure on it last time by offering a range. That range was based on a sample of local town councils of comparable size to Whitstable, which we felt was a reasonable comparison without giving any sort of formal commitment. Through the course of the consultation last time, you know, other exceptional councils were highlighted as being outside of that range, so therefore how can you say it will cost between X and Y. So it's a very difficult question to answer, but I think, again, we will probably give an indication of what a typical average looks like, but we will have to caveat whatever we say with the fact that the council will set the first precept, and after that it will be for the town council, if there is one, to set its own after that. And of course the rules around the setting of the precept are slightly different for a town and parish council in that they don't have a cap in the same way that district or upper tier do. So again, we will just be informing of what the facts are and leaving people to draw their own conclusion. Around the geographical patterns, yes, there was some indication of that last time, and I know the working group did take that into account. It was one of the points that came back as quite a prominent point in the survey last time. So we'll see what people have to say this time in the context of everything that is happening with LGR, etc.
Thank you, Matthew. Yes, Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the public speakers. There are a number of points and questions made during those speeches. I stopped making those points because I saw you were writing down, Matthew. So can we address them directly now, or will that be done in written form? And can we have sight? And I'm sure the member group will have sight of that as well. Point 2, naturally, phase 1 is really important. It sets the scene. We don't want to steer, but we don't want to make it so vague that we don't get a view on how we can move into phase 2. So naturally, the member group will be looking at that. Will they look at best practice of phase 1s in other areas? So not obviously cut and paste, but what worked and what didn't, because obviously if there's others that failed in some points, then let's not make those failures. Point 3, page 16, it mentions invitations to take part in consultations will be sent to, big list, and it says local political parties and Camden City Council councillors. Now, I am assuming that the invitations will be for phase 1, because councillors will be in listening mode for phase 2, and we shouldn't be steering the rhetoric. So is there advice to be given to all members on how to engage through this consultation and when to shut up and listen, and then see what happens afterwards? And final question, if it does come out that we need leaflets, how are we going to be determining how those leaflets are distributed? Will it be electoral roll or council tax? Because obviously we don't want to miss anybody out. So households and how we will be doing that. Naturally, that would be for the group to decide, but any early steer from best practice as well would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to bring Matthew back in, who was making those notes during the public speeches. So, Matthew, over to you.
I can't help but make notes. It's a reflex action, I think. I'll take some and I'll pass some to Richard as well. So on Richard's points, yes, the context of LGR was welcomed, and I think it's obviously important for us that we make it clear that's part of the reason why councillors have asked for this review to be undertaken at this time. I think Richard's already covered the question of the 2 phases and why it's being done slightly differently this time. I think it's a different proposition here. Here we're looking at whether they should change in the context of LGR instead of a proposition that's being put to us, which we are seeking views on. I think in terms of how will LGR, the questions that we ask, how will LGR affect local representation, and what are your concerns? We do need to think carefully about our wording. It can't be leading to people have concerns. So I think we will be looking at the wording of our survey very carefully. And I think the fact that Richard's got the experience that he has in terms of the questions that he's asked elsewhere and how that works in terms of feedback, we're certainly taking advantage of that as part of as part of the work that we're doing at the moment in preparation. To Mr. Pullen's questions, I think noting with reference to neighbourhood area committees that they're not an alternative to parish councils. I think, yes, we would make that clear too. I mean, looking at the trend for neighbourhood area committees in the unitaries, again, they're not being set up in a sort of uniform manner. It's very much at the discretion of the unitary how they choose to set them up, what powers they might give them, and those powers either are devolved from the unitary. So again, it's a different proposition to that of a parish or town council. But if the question is asked about what they look like, you know, we will explain that it's something that's separate but has been called for by the ministers in relation to new unitaries, so that they have that context. And I think noting the points in the report around it not being a referendum, that views will be taken into account. Yes, we're very much aware of that, and certainly mindful of that from the last review that we did, that the requirement to take the views of the consultation responses into account in your review is an important factor. So I hope that covers most of the points raised in your first question. Just coming back to some of the other points, I think on the phase 1 questions, I'll hand that one to Richard in a minute. And on the list of people and the fact that councillors will be in listening mode in phase 1 and any advice, yes, I mean, we will within the survey be able to identify whether it's a councillor that's responded. So there will be the ability to sort of separate out where views have been expressed. I think we will be reiterating the advice that we often give around bias and predetermination and predisposition. So it's similar, I would say, within a CGR. To the principles that we would normally offer for, you know, planning matters, that you can have an initial view, but until you've seen the report and the consultation responses, we would urge you to keep an open mind until you make your final decisions. And in relation to the leaflets and how they're distributed, last time we relied on Royal Mail and they were done by postcode. That's not a perfect solution because postcodes do not necessarily mirror the boundaries that either exist or might exist. However, at the moment, unless we come up with a better solution, we would be doing the same again. But again, if we get to that point, then we will look at whether there are other options, and if so, what they look like. Richard, is there anything you wanted to pick up?
Yeah, thank you. In terms of phase 1, and you mentioned about best practice, in a review of this nature, having a very open phase 1 is the best practice that I've come across. I know you can do a review if you have one question and it's a yes/no question, and you've already decided that's what the proposal is. You just do one stage of consultation. You don't need a second one. In this case, we want to know the range of options, particularly in the existing parishes. If they want changes, we need to know what they're suggesting and what they'd like us to consider for the phase 2, which is much more detailed. So this is the best way of engaging as many people as possible for as many different views as possible, noting that the reality is if you ask man on the street, woman on the street, what do you think about community governance in your area, they'll probably give you a very blank look. But the people who are engaged with this will be able to understand what we're asking them, what type of things are available, and then they'll come back to the councillor working group to develop the draft proposals. And when there's a draft proposal, that's when people will be able to say, this is what we're suggesting, and people will be better able to answer yes or no, I support it. Just to add to, as Matthew said about when we invite councillors to respond, you are all local residents as well, so you are perfectly entitled, and we would hope you would want to have a view on community governance in your area and make a submission. But when it then comes back to the decision-making process, you separate your own views as you would for planning and other matters. And in terms of leaflet distribution, again, as Matthew said, Royal Mail is the simplest option in many ways, technically we want to hear from local government electors, but actually you want to know from householders where people haven't yet registered as well. So Royal Mail, and I would suggest depending on exactly where those boundaries fall, or if there's other changes we need to consult in local residents, there'll be targeted distribution as well. So if it's a handful of houses outside the Royal Mail catchment zone, we'd be able to do another leaflet drop in another way to target those properties. But we're looking at households, not the electoral register.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Brady.
Thank you. Just coming back on phase one, I think obviously the information document is going to be incredibly important, and sometimes we might steer unintentionally. So that's why I was looking at best practice of what others have done and wording within that information document, so we don't make the mistakes that they might have made due to an incorrect word here or there that might have a bias or a different framing of something.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. We're mindful of things that have been done in the past in a range of different authorities, and what's worked and what hasn't, to try and ensure that we use the right wording. And we obviously have the council's consultation experts and communication experts to help make sure, and you'll know the people involved who are very particular in making sure we use the right words and the meaning of words and how it all can come across. So we're very mindful of that to try and make sure it's as unbiased as possible, but knowing that we, at the end of this, will be considering all the responses. There are statutory criteria which we don't need to worry about now, about what we have to consider through the review. People, when they make the response, don't care what those considerations are. They're going to make their views known, and we then match them against those statutory criteria. So that's my job. That's why I'm here to provide that support. But that will all be presented back to councillors when we get to the stage where we've had responses, we're making decisions, you're making decisions based on those responses. It'll be much clearer for how a response feeds into that process, and how we're taking it on board, and what that means, and what the proposal is going to be as a result.
Thank you. Councillor Jeanette Stockley.
Thank you. I'm not for or against this. However, you said when you put out there we're having a governance review, and some people will say, what's that? I won't engage. But those that do know will engage. That's what bothers me about it, because those that don't know and don't engage potentially are still going to have to pay for something. I'd just like to put that out there, please.
Yeah, thank you, and it's a valid concern. When we get to the second stage, so at this first stage, we're saying, what do you think? Not everybody will be able to answer that question. At the second stage, if we come back with a proposal to create town councils, we'll be saying, our proposal is to create this town council in your area. This is what a town council is. This is what it might mean for you. Do you support it or not? And why do you feel that way? And it's that nuance of why people feel that way is also very important. It's not a vote. It's not a referendum. It's a discussion and a consultation. So when people say because, and then we can take those views into account and understand those. But it's at that second stage consultation where we'll be able to give that specific information, saying this is what we're proposing for your area, and this is how we think it could affect you. What do you think? That's when people will be able to engage, whether they're aware of what community governance is or not, because we'll be setting out in a way that will mean something for them and their circumstances.
Thank you. Councillor Butcher.
Yes, following on from there, how do you envisage what type of communications you are going to use to reach everybody?
Thank you. For the stage 2 consultation, our expectation is that if there is a change, such as creating or proposal to create a town or parish council, there will be something delivered to your doorstep to explain that. That's the proposal. In the first stage, it's going to be mainly digital information, but the second stage, we're asked where there's a proposal that might affect you and your household, we'll make sure that something comes to your doorstep so you know that it's going to happen and you've got a chance to respond.
Councillor Brady.
Thank you. Just coming back on phase one, can the steering group, the member group, take note that it would be ideal to have the most amount of people responding? It was said that not everybody could be able to or might not want to engage, but I think it's our job to try and maximise the responses. the worst thing about questionnaires and consultations are the only ones that partake in questionnaires and consultations are people that partake in questionnaires and consultations. And we need to reach people that don't usually do that. I know we're going to be reaching a lot of people who don't usually do that at phase 2, but we should also be interested in everybody's view at phase 1. So if the member group could be aware and try and look at not just best practice, ways to engage with the most amount of people, then that will be definitely beneficial to the outcome of what we get and how we move into phase 2.
Yes, I think just to endorse that, really, if councillors can be part of that conversation with their local residents, constituents, that's hugely beneficial to us. And obviously you're getting first-hand feedback in doing that as well, that you can bring to the table. So if you're talking to people and you can encourage them to complete the questionnaire or engage in the process, even if they have very little to say, a view of any type will be taken into consideration as part of our work, and it would be obviously great to hear from people. We have seen from the pattern elsewhere that, let's be honest, this is quite a niche topic for the general public, and we don't anticipate that we would get huge numbers of responses. You know, we're not talking thousands for phase 1. And well, yeah, by all means, see it as a challenge. However, it's the quality of the responses that will count, and that will inform what then comes in stage 2. And I hope there is then a bigger conversation around what is put on the table in stage 2, and we'll certainly be putting our efforts into promoting a strong response to that, so that you can reach an informed decision.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Ian Stockley.
Thank you. Sorry. This is a bit of a soul searching for me. I'm sitting here and considering my position on the last CGR, where I came out quite strongly, well, the previous one, against a town council for Herne Bay. Obviously, I'm now thinking that there is probably a record of my opinion somewhere out there. I now need to make clear that everything has changed, as we said previously. You know, this is a completely different situation we're in now. And I just doing a bit of soul searching, thinking that am I in a position to make that decision after coming out quite strongly against it previously? But I personally feel that I am in a position where I can consider it openly and without bias. So I just wanted to put that on record, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, just to say, we have been asked that question, and I think we're very clear that a line is drawn under any reviews that have gone before, and this is a new exercise with because we're in a different circumstance altogether, and a brand new consultation and a different style of consultation as well. So as far as we're concerned, it's a blank page. Any views that were previously expressed related to a completely different review, not this one.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Just following up some responses to councillors' questions. The response to Councillor Brady's question about the reach for phase 1. I've just had a quick look online, and I've seen that there's a council post on Facebook saying when the drop-in centres are in May. For example, Monday 11th of May in Canterbury, but it's not on the council website, and it's not. You know, are there other forms of media rather than Facebook that can get that out there? Because we are probably going to have the same narrow number of people that we would normally get for consultations. A point that's been made a couple of times tonight. But can we think about this in terms of how we get that reach at this stage? If I'm incorrect there, it's my Google ability that's not good, but I couldn't find it immediately, only on Facebook. And the other point that was in response to Councillor Butcher's question about the everybody would be leafleted who is affected. I'm not sure that feels right, really. So if I lived in an unparished area and the proposal in phase 2 was that there was going to be a town council, then I'd be leafleted. But if I was in a currently parished area, I wouldn't be leafleted. But I think everybody in the district really should be told about all of the changes that are proposed. Now, I know that does import some cost, but I think that feels the right thing to do, that people across the district should be told about what's happening in other areas. So if I lived in a parished area, but the proposal was that Herne Bay, Whitstable and Canterbury City were going to have town councils, I think that's something I would like to know, even if I wasn't directly affected and it wasn't going to necessarily attract a precept to my area. I still think it's something that the people of the district should know. Not a decision for tonight, but that feels the sort of direction of travel that I think we would be looking to go.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that. On the second point, the way that a second stage consultation would normally happen, in the way that I've seen it done elsewhere and worked on them with other councils, is you would make sure a physical hard copy document lands on the doorstep of any household which will be directly affected. So creating a new town council, changing the external boundary of a parish council, so you take on a new housing estate or divesting of a housing estate, for example, the people in that affected area would get a leaflet. Other changes that aren't directly affecting them tend not to get a hard copy. So you're changing the number of parish councillors. Most people in the parish won't really mind. Most of them wouldn't know what the number of parish councillors are now anyway. They wouldn't get a leaflet. And if it's changes happening elsewhere in the district, they wouldn't get a leaflet. But they would still get, if they're on an email list, they'll get email communication. There'll be information going out to the parish councils. We'll be working with the communications team of the city council to make sure as information gets out to as many people as possible, whilst also minimising the financial cost, given that we want to maximise the responses on the people who'll be directly affected. But I take your point that if you live somewhere else, you still care that Canterbury, Herne Bay and Whitstable may have changes coming up, but perhaps you care slightly less than if it was in your specific area. So we will make sure there is communication going out to them, but the hard copy leaflets, which is where the bulk of the cost comes in, would be targeted at those people who would be directly affected.
Thank you, Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair. I just a bit of clarity from what Peter was just saying, I suppose, because there may be circumstances where we might create a town council in Herne Bay, and just as we have wards, again, depends how we decide a town council is going to be structured, I suppose. But as of now, I mean, wards do cover parished areas. So there may be circumstances. The fact that we create a town council doesn't mean that the parishes are not affected. Yeah, there will be could be another layer on top of a parish council, which becomes the town council, or whichever way we want to structure it.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, town councils tend to have wards, but those wards are wards of the town council, and that doesn't affect the city, district or county wards. So they're completely separate tiers. But I would expect if you have a large-ish town that's currently has more than one county division, we would have to ward it for technical reasons, which we'll deal with nearer the time if it happens. I'll explain in more detail. But in order to serve, effectively, the town council ward is to serve a specific local community. That's what we're interested in. Where is your community? Which are the shops you go to? Where are the schools you go to? The churches, whatever. How does your community fit together? If we draw a line around that on the map, that's where the ward of that town council would be. And then you build up your town council based on all these circles, blobs, to identify where those communities are. But the town council wards are completely separate from the city and county wards.
Your indulgence, Chair. No, it wasn't quite what I was trying to say. It's because the implication from Peter's comment was that somehow the parish councils would be separate, a different body from a town council, and in fact there may actually be overlaps in terms that, whichever we want to define it, let's call it a ward. That's what we use at the moment. The language at the moment is a ward. A ward may actually lay over a parish council area, and therefore are we repeating sort of the how to use the phrase, but master servant, sort of junior, senior bodies in terms of who responds to whom and where the power structures lie.
So a parish or town council being the same thing with a different name, effectively. So your parish area is served by either a parish council or a town council. There would not be an overlap between a parish council and the town council. They are two separate bodies at the same level. Just as you have two districts next to each other, they overlap. And the wards of a town council don't have any overlap with any of the neighbouring parishes. They're completely separate.
Yeah, so in the future we'll have the unitary divisions, wards, whatever they are called. Let's assume divisions, and then possibly town council or nothing below in the urban areas, and then that will be it. That's the proposition.
Sorry to labour the point, Chair. Maybe I'm being thick. So what we're saying then, therefore, is that a parish council will be a separate entity from a town council, and that therefore the parish council may have similar powers, obligations, whatever you want to call them, to a town council. Okay, so no double presetting or whatever.
No, parish and town exactly the same. A town council might do a bit more than a parish just because it's a bit bigger normally and it has a bit more money, but it's essentially got exactly the same powers.
Thank you, Matthew. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Ian Stockley.
I promise I'll shut up in a minute. It just occurs to me that we as councillors here get paid an allowance. My understanding is that parish/town councillors generally do not receive an allowance, but they are able to claim expenses. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in very rare occasions, some very large town councils do pay an allowance, but the vast majority do not. But parish councils can claim expenses. In my experience, most don't because they're serving a very local community. They don't have big expenses. But yes, generally there's no allowances for parish and town councillors.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Before I just round up, just a couple of comments from me. I think that from my own experience in thinking about Whitstable, I know we've said that in phase one, it's very open, that we're going to gather thoughts at phase one and then more detail in phase two. I think this is for officers and the working group to consider. I still think even at phase one, you're going to get the question about cost and what it is that I get for cost. What is it I'm paying for? We're beginning to see that already in discussion groups and on social media in parts of Whitstable. So I think it would be appropriate to think about something even at phase one rather than leaving that for phase two in terms of how that is answered. And secondly, I think, the other question I think you need to be prepared for, a Whitstable specific question is, why are we considering this again? Now, there are reasons for why this has come forward, and we know that because the unitary authority process is going through. I'm beginning to see some of those questions appear on social media channels, and I've been approached by residents about it as well, about haven't we decided this 2 years ago? I think we just need to be prepared with an answer for that at this stage, phase one, to make it quite clear that where we are now with unitary authorities coming in, that has shifted the goalposts. So I think that needs to be considered up front, even at phase one, rather than waiting for phase two. Those would be my 2 points for the working group and for officers to consider. Just rounding up, the huge amount of comments that have been made tonight by members of the public and members, thank you for those. But if I go through, and feel free to shout out any that I missed, the general comments that I've heard are, coming back to that point, what does a parish or town council do? The powers that it has, we need to consider how we explain that. The cost associated with running them, the interaction between town council boundaries and existing parish council boundaries. The distribution and how we're getting the message out to people at phase one, how we're going to really get that out, particularly to our residents who may not normally respond to a consultation like this. And I think, by the way, part of that is due to us as councillors to really inform our communities that this is coming, that this is out there. And at phase one, indeed, there were questions about what we include in the information document at phase one, how important that will be, that councillors should be in listening mode, certainly for phase two when the proposals are made, and that phase one sets the scene, and we don't want to steer it, but we don't want it to be too vague either, which comes back to my earlier point about we have to be prepared with some information, I think, at phase one to inform the public in terms of what some of these options are about. It's a general roundup. Did I miss anything important there? Well, I do. Okay. Thank you. In which case, we now go to a vote on the recommendation that was moved at the very beginning, just to repeat, which was the recommendation for option 1, that the terms of reference for the community governance review be approved, effectively launching the first round of public consultation. This is a recorded vote, so you get to press your buttons and good to go. Off we go.
And that's carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you, Pippa. That's carried unanimously. So what happens next is that recommendation now goes to full council, which meets next week, Thursday, the 30th of April, here at the Guildhall at 7 o'clock. That is open to the public to attend as well, and that will be put before full council to vote upon and decide. Moving on with the agenda. So item 7, I'm not aware of any other urgent business to be dealt with in public. Item 8, nothing for the exclusion of the press or public. And item 9, any other urgent business which falls under the exempt provisions of the Local Government Act 72 or the Freedom of Information Act 2000 or both. We've not been notified of any. So that brings our meeting to a close. Can I thank the members of the public who spoke, the members of the public who are here tonight attending the meeting, or indeed watching at home, and members of your, and Matthew and Richard, thank you for your time as well. The time is coming up for 8:14. Wish you all a safe journey home.